Yeah, a little bit of technical difficulties in our technical world. So appreciate you having me. I am Chris Seferlis. Been here at Microsoft just about 2 years. Senior data and AI specialist. Came up through the technical world as I don't know why this keeps doing that. Let's see if that's better. Um, Came up through the world of IT, started at help desk, pretty much in the systems world. Became a CIO about, I guess it was about 13 years ago now, and really stayed true to my roots and stayed technical as much as I could. When I came over to Microsoft, I was a TSP and then a cloud solution architect and about a year ago, a little over a year ago, flipped over to more of the sales approach, and really just trying to help provide value to my customers and things like that. Do a bunch of stuff outside of work too. Try to stay outside as much as I can. I've got two girls, 8 and 10. They play soccer, so I coach them, and a lot of folks will reach out to me for advice and guidance and things like that in their career. Feel free to connect with me on social, ping me if you have any questions or looking for any advice. Definitely willing to help out and point you in the right direction best I can. Also have the YouTube channel where I post some videos on Azure and data services, and I got a couple of videos on like professional development and stuff like that too. So appreciate the support there. And yeah, so looking forward to kind of getting into it today. And as we come into the conversation here, I think Gene said it best, right? Is comments are always welcome as long as they're respectful, right? And what we're going to talk about today, this stuff evolves and changes so quickly that it's really hard to say that this is going to be the perfect solution, today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now, right? It all just evolves so very quickly. It's really hard to say what the best solution will be in the future. All we can do is work with what we have, the guidelines with which our companies give us. What are their requirements? What are the leading factors as to why to make a technology change or an investment or things like that, right? And so let's just bear that in mind as we kind of go through some of this. For anybody who's familiar with some of the Microsoft presentations, we talk very frequently about this digital feedback loop and the digital transformation that our businesses have gone through over the past 20 years or so. And it really is all about these four tenets, right? It's the ability to engage your customers and serve them better. It's the ability to empower your employees to help them be more efficient and more effective in what they do. It's about optimizing and saving costs where we can, that might be unnecessary, but also not at the deprecation of our businesses, and also being able to transform and move ahead. And one alarming stat is that since 2000, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies are gone. Some of that's going to be merger and acquisition, and so we understand that. But the reality is, they've been digitally disrupted, and really they've gone through the painful process of not being able to evolve, and have paid the consequences as a result. And when we look at some of the reasons why, and this is a data related topic, obviously, cloud data driven user group. Our modern data problem is that we have the 3 V's, the volume, variety, and velocity of data. I've heard it referred to as the 4 V's, the fourth one being the veracity of data, right? Just gnarly, nasty data. But the way that we can use this data is to look at what's happened in the past, take that data and process it as quickly as we can to see what's happening today and right now, and then finally, get an understanding of sort of what we think will happen tomorrow. And with the advancements of advanced analytics and artificial intelligence and some of these other platforms, it really gives us a basis to understand where this could go, right? And there are always those black swan moments when you don't know for sure, but it's good to at least be somewhat prepared. Now, when we talk about SQL Database specifically, what Microsoft wants to offer is really based on these three core pieces, being, elastic scale and performance, the business continuity and data protection, and what customers are used to, but taking away the administration aspects that nobody loves, right? Nobody loves doing backups. Nobody loves tuning queries. Nobody loves some of that overhead that we have to deal with. And so, here's how we approach it and try to help customers with some of these items. Now, the way that we'll kind of go through the discussion today, it really kind of lends itself to the discussion of where we start on premises, with whatever SQL version you're currently using, looking at, what do we look at for lift and shift and going to a SQL virtual machine? And then finally, what does Azure Database, Azure SQL Database have to offer that really allows us to reduce some of that overhead that we talked about and, remove some of the blockers for us to be able to digitally transform. So when we go to these managed solutions, these are the items that we're talking about removing and giving more flexibility to our staff to be able to help innovate and help drive the company forward rather than the overhead. So when we look at an overview of SQL Database, right, we provide several deployment options to meet your workload needs, right? Each standalone database is assigned a certain amount of resources with performance tiers, and they have, basic, standard, premium. And really the emphasis is to focus on a simplified database scoped programming model. And the applications that you run off of those databases to be able to have a predictable pattern and a relatively stable workload. An elastic pool is really it's a shared resource model that enables like higher resource resolution and utilization that helps us to be very efficient, and all the databases within those elastic pools share predefined resources within that same pool. Really, and the idea is to have a simplified database scope programming model for multi-tenant SaaS applications, right? It's well-defined and it's a highly cost-effective application because you can scale resources to the certain tenants that need it when they do. And then finally, SQL Database Managed Instance, while you're all here today, offers a simplified instance scoped programming model with 99% of the surface area and features that you're used to using with SQL on-prem. And basically, the databases within MI share the resources that are allocated to that entire instance, the cluster, if you will. And it also represents the management grouping for those databases. And really the idea is to provide a highly compatible SQL server with the majority of the SQL features out of the box, and for accompanying the existing tool and services that we all know and love really well. And then when we kind of go through it, we look at the various service tiers that we have. So you have the serverless tier, which is kind of what it says it is, right? You're not provisioning servers behind the scenes. You don't have something that's persistent. You can turn it up and turn it down as you need. You think about something that isn't an application that needs to be running all the time. Whatever, an expense report application that you're running or something like that. You can spin that down when it's not being used, and there might be a half a minute or a minute spin up time to get it running. Then you have your hyperscale tier, which is for these massive workloads, right? 100 terabytes plus of data in your databases that you want to be able to scale out and scale up very quickly and easily. And then the general purpose versus the business critical tier, they kind of are what they say they are, right? Business critical, you're going to get 5 nines of SLA, whereas general purpose, you get 3 nines and a 5. You've got the ability to do more replication to other regions through business critical, whereas general purpose, you don't have as many features there. And then we'll kind of get into some what are the other differentiators are between the two tiers, but really they kind of spell it out for themselves, which one you'd want to use and where. Now, to show what we look at when we consider our current landscape of SQL servers, you still have the old bare metal or raw iron, if you will, for those really big honking SQL servers that are deemed to not be able to be virtualized. And then will run a hypervisor, whether it be Hyper-V or VMware or one of the other many hypervisors out there that are available. And then we kind of get into IaaS and PaaS. And as the graphic here displays, the lower left is the higher administration and the dedicated higher cost, right? So the higher amount of capital expenditure to procure these types of servers, whereas kind of going off to the top right, you've got the lower administration and more of a shared cost model, so you can reduce the overall cost of ownership for your database servers. And just kind of at a real high level, some of the key benefits, which we talked about a little bit in one of the earlier slides, but it's all about having the availability, the flexibility, the elasticity, of your databases and the services that in essence customers need, right? It's all about demand from customers. And a little later, we'll talk about what customers are looking at today that they want added to the service and how it's being addressed. But it's all about, we want to respond to customers and what their needs are, and obviously the loudest voice in the room usually wins. And so you'll see that as the service has evolved over the last I guess call it 2.5 years probably. A ton of features and capabilities have been added, in response to what customers are looking for. Plus, as Microsoft has evolved to more of a service model and an application service model, as opposed to boxed up software, we want to evolve the products and stay competitive to make sure we're offering the best solution to our customers. When it comes to database, SQL Database Managed Instance itself, I misspoke earlier. It's 4 nines and a 5. I said it was five nines, but we're looking at really that full SQL Server service area. So we're having the ability to have our SQL agent, to be able to use things like DBmail and some of the other capabilities that just aren't available in SQL DB. We're offering customers that capability all in one virtualized cluster that's secure, and we'll show tenant isolation here in a bit. But it also has sort of the built-in HA with always on. It's got the built-in intelligent performance and security, and really the goal here was to give customers a cloud destination service that they had to do virtually no code changes to their applications to be able to move it up. And more recently, we've offered 2 different models of compute. Again, we heard what customers had to say for what their needs were. The DTU model was aligning what you had for compute and storage and memory, kind of aligned in this, I guess, scalar graph to show, okay, well, if you need X amount of compute, you must need X amount of memory and X amount of storage. And we've changed that some with the vCore model. And so depending on what's required, if you need a different number of vCores or a different amount of RAM or, those types of things, we're able to accommodate some of that to be able to help customers out and make it easier for them to do those migrations. And then, kind of boiling it down a little bit more, some of the benefits of the vCore model is that, you basically have a specific unit of measure for the available CPUs in that space. And then, it just makes it easier to right size for your environment as opposed to trying to fit it in a perfect box with the DTU model. So we want to give customers more capabilities and more control over what the environment looks like. Now, one of the big differentiators of Azure, as opposed to some of our competitive clouds, really comes down to being able to take advantage of your hybrid benefits. And we were just working with a customer that have a very, very large SQL footprint. I mean, hundreds of servers that are just SQL alone in production, and then thousands of servers to run one application. And, when we looked at the price difference without using the hybrid benefit, the cost savings was about 86%, including some machines that were, 50 or 60K a month, being like an M series with, fully loaded box with, SQL Enterprise. And because they already have that SQL licensing, we're able to dramatically reduce those costs to like 4 or 5K a month, right? So really, really dramatic pricing differences. And one of the other differentiators is down the bottom here with the Enterprise Edition. If you're using Enterprise Edition on-prem because it had some capability that you needed when you originally bought it, but you no longer need that capability, or possibly it's covered within the general purpose tier, then you can sort of convert those SQL Enterprise Edition licenses to 4 licenses for vCores in the general purpose tier. Otherwise, the graphic shows it pretty well, where essentially your cores with software assurance, this all assumes software assurance, but your cores on-prem, standard edition equates to a 1-for-1 with general purpose, and Enterprise Edition equates to a 1-for-1 with business critical. Now, looking at sort of the overall footprint of what we offer with regard to the various tiers and compute levels, you can see that there are a wider range of offers and options here. The business critical tier now has support for 8 terabytes. In the managed instance, originally it was limited to 4 terabytes. You'll see in a little bit here, but 16 terabytes per instance are in preview now for managed instance in the general purpose tier. And we'll kind of go through what the replicas look like and some of the backups and things like that, as those are also changing over time. Now, when customers want to understand the differences of the different offerings, right? There's certainly quite a few, and we understand that, right? There are a lot of decision points. There's some great articles out there on the web on how to determine which one your best is, or a lot of decision trees about which version of SQL you should be using. But when it comes to specifically managed instance, I said earlier, it really comes down to how do we help customers with their migrations to a cloud database system without having to change that application and make major changes to the database in the background. And when we look at the managed instance, it really provides complete workload isolation of your workloads through native VNet support. We use virtual data clusters to describe the degree of isolation that customer workloads will experience with managed instance. Now, during service provision, on the Azure portal or through like a REST API, you can choose the virtual network and the subnet to achieve full network isolation for the entire managed instance. And once it's created, instances in the VNet can be reached using Azure networking mechanisms such as VPN and express route gateways. So now to boil this down, right? We're able to enable full isolation from other tenants without resource sharing. And we can promote really a secure communication over private IP addresses with native VNet integration. We're also allowing you to enable your on-premises identities on cloud instances through integration with Azure Active Directory and Active Directory connecting. So we've got a virtual private cluster that is wrapped in a VNet that gives us isolated access to the tenant. That VNet isn't going to touch the internet. It's, as a matter of fact, if you try to configure it the subnet to be able to reach the internet, you're not able to. It will fail on you. And then if we, bring in, say a second VNet for our server side, whatever our application lives on, whether it be an IaaS hosted app or a web application, we can tie VNets together with VNet to VNet peering, and then have our web app, go through that VNet connection or the IaaS hosted app as your front end that can be reached from the internet, or we can have it, all wrapped in one VNet and have separate subnets for those, and still allowing the same capability. And then, basically we allow our customers to get in through a VPN or an express route from their on-premises or from a client machine, in through the Azure portal. And then ultimately, as we go through how this is being deployed over time, you'll see some of these service endpoints for things like Power BI, right? And so, being able to have those IP tables for the various services that are outside Azure, we'll have those unlocked, and so you'll be able to tap directly into SQL MI. Now, basically, when we talk about the secure elements of it here, right? We basically want to take as secure approach as possible. And so we have, enhanced monitoring of our Azure assets, right? We've got a collection of low fidelity anomalous activities that we are already seeing, right? And so we can sniff those out very, very quickly. Microsoft spends $1 billion a year on security, and we've got 3,500 security professionals working for us, and that's their full-time job every day. We do monitoring for perf, for traits of things like cryptocurrency mining and stuff like that to try to thwart those types of things. And we have a large set of other detections that we're not going to talk about publicly because we don't want we don't want people to know. You probably heard that SolarGate, we were one of the first companies to bring forward information about it, and there were just sanctions announced today, because they've identified, basically Russia as the leading culprit in some of those attacks. Now we've got the SQL Red Team that basically sits out there and tries to attack us, right? They're security professionals that work for Microsoft, and they are trying to find holes, right? And they're constantly in there, looking for ways to get in and see if they can get in undetected and wreak some havoc. And then of course you've got the Blue Team that practices defense in depth, right? And then when we detect something, we're basically going to raise awareness of it, so whether you use the Azure Security portal, and other mechanisms like that to get your alerting and notifications, there's a lot of opportunity to do that. And, the good thing is that, we're making sure for you, and then you've got your own layer of security for your own testing as well. Now, you can choose to host applications in the cloud, either by using Azure App Service or some other, some Azure virtual machine, right? So you're going to have the VNet integration options like Azure App Service environment. You have virtual machines, you have virtual machine scale sets. You could also take a hybrid approach and keep your applications on premises, right? So, Azure resources can communicate privately with each other through Azure virtual networks or VNets, right? And you get that logical isolation of the Azure cloud dedicated to your subscription that way. But you can also implement multiple VNets within each Azure subscription, and you can connect those to each other. But then you can also connect them, via peering to other VNets, or you can use a VPN gateway to enable these resources to connect from across the wire, right? So just a kind of a different way of looking at an architectural design and ways that MI can be deployed to serve a whole plethora of options, for deployments. And then of course you can connect on-prem, as we showed before. When we talk about virtual networking, right, this is where a lot of our security gets wrapped into it, and you'll come across some of these when you are deploying an MI, right? So for instance, you've got to have, at least a mask of /28 or 24. So you need 16 IP addresses. So that's to handle all the networking, to handle the clusters and all that, right? And the instance itself is, depending on its general purpose, if business critical, is going to need 2 or 4 addresses. So just something to be mindful of when you are deploying it. If you're getting errors because you don't have enough IPs and things like that, that's probably why. Now, one of the nice things is, and I highly recommend, is to use, there are templates out there, on GitHub and whatnot. You can deploy all the various requirements that you have, the different parameters that you need for your instance when you're deploying it, such as how much storage, how many vCores, how many network IPs and all that kind of stuff. So it's gonna help you walk through that. You can build it yourself, but it's certainly more work and more opportunity to do it incorrectly. Now, clearly, it has to be deployed in an Azure virtual network, right? And that allows for connecting directly from on-premises networks, or linked servers or other on-premises data stores, things like that. And really, we talked about the IPs and your routing just has to be defined ahead of time. And this comes into play more when we start talking about replication and high availability and things like that. So really the core capabilities here are that we have that fully managed service, right? It's built on the same infrastructure as SQL Database that you see and know and love. However, it is an evergreen version. It's its own version of SQL, and it's a higher version than anything that is publicly available, from an on-premises standpoint. Currently, you cannot restore a backup from SQL MI to your on-premises environment. You have to do like a BCP or something along those lines to be able to move that data over. However, that is one of the items that the product group is looking at to be able to enable customers on, and there is an open request on user voice to have that ability. And so that's something they are looking at to be able to give customers that capability. And really, it all comes down to, we talked about this some, is being able to use the tools the way that you currently use them on-prem. So whether it be SSMS or Azure Data Studio, you can use the Azure portal. So we have some of the tooling, your query generator inside the portal. You can do a lot of your configuration and management from right inside the Azure portal. But then you also have the capabilities to be able to run it from the SSMS standpoint. Essentially more capability comes out all the time. Azure Data Studio, as additional plugins get created and things like that, there's just more and more capability there. When we talk about the ability to have the compatibility that we're looking for, right? A lot of the things that customers called out for, CLR or in-memory column store indexes or dynamic management views and those types of things that get deeper into the weeds in the SQL footprint. MI gave us that ability to open up and give more of that capability. And so just again, offering customers more to work with as they have more and more complex workloads. Now, over time, some of these services were native when it was deployed, and we've just added more availability and more capability over time. Disaster recovery with single geo is available. Single geo secondary for DR, and if you need a third geo to be able to failover to, that's something that they're working on, right? So they're adding that capability. We look at things with compliance, right? Microsoft is the most compliant cloud. when it comes to government and regulatory compliance. When we talk about things like performance tuning, query processing, we're working on that, getting that more up to speed. Currently available, some of it's currently available, and then some is being worked on in various stages of preview. Dynamic data discovery and classification allows us to go through and look for things like PII data, things like that. Within our databases, we can do tagging, and that can carry right through to Synapse or Power BI. So there's a lot of opportunity there to have our data governed in a nice, clean way. One of the big ones is that you can restore databases directly into MI from as far back as SQL 2005, right? So you can take your old legacy applications that run on 05 that maybe didn't run in SQL Database, or maybe won't run on a virtual machine anymore, and you can do those restore, and you can keep it at that level until you get a chance to modernize it or what you need to do. And then when we look at some of the moving forward elements and really some of the real differentiators of MI, there was a lot of requirements for cross-database queries and transactions. Linked servers to SQL Server is available. So if you've got another MI, you can link servers amongst SQL. .NET CLR. You've got change data capture and transactional replication. We've got ML services and data virtualization, which is in preview now, to be able to attach to blob storage for being able to connect to things like Parquet and other distributed data sources, right? And then MSDTC is sort of a work in progress. So you can do distributed transactions amongst MIs. However, pure MSDTC, we look at other ways to do it, whether it be through linked servers, and being able to somewhat minimize that footprint. True MSDTC is probably not going to happen because of the complexity there. But there are ways around it. And then, of course, file stream and file table, just they're further off. Part of the reason for that is because you don't have access to those underlying disks. When you build up that cluster, it's a managed interface. And so all you have access to is the SQL Server itself, and you don't have access to the underlying storage. So that makes it a little harder to deploy when you have the reliance on the server for file stream and file table. Same thing with regard to management, right? Dynamic management views, you've got query store, you've got X events. So we talked about SQL agent and DBmail. You've got sysadmin privileges and resource governor. A couple of tweaks, right? You're going to change MDW and start using OMS, or Operation Management Suite, which is your single pane of glass. You've got SQL auditing, row level security, always encrypted, TDE, dynamic data masking, all of the differentiators for Azure SQL in general, and our database products, and then of course integrated authentication with Azure Active Directory and network security with VNets and private IPs, which we've kind of talked about ad nauseum. And then really it's that enterprise grade security that it's basically set apart and gives our customers the ability to trust that we're working on their behalf to make sure that they are secure. And the reality is that SQL has been the most trusted enterprise platform that has seen the least amount of attacks, successful attacks over the last 7 years. It's a bit of an old graphic. But I think it tells the story. You can see the vast difference compared to the competitors. The last piece that really is worth considering, is how to save some money when you're looking to move to Azure SQL, and really that's about reserving the capacity. Hey, look, I have this application that I know I'm going to be running for the next few years. and so I'm going to need the compute, and you can save some significant money by using the reservations and the hybrid benefit, right? So it says up to 80%. It's actually higher in some cases. I've seen it as high as 93% savings when we talk about a 3-year reserved instance and using the SQL hybrid and Windows hybrid benefit. So roadmap, the exciting stuff, right? Just in the last year or so, there's a bunch of features that have been brought in, local time zones, custom instance collation, public endpoints, the 4 vCore instances and instance pools, and that's for production. But then we also have 1 and 2 vCore instances for our dev test pools, the dev test offer. We've got AAD logins, failover groups, point in time restores, which are in preview, right? And then basically, when we look at what else is available for pure SQL, you look at things like in-memory OLTP and column store, JSON support and some limited graph database support, geo support, things like that. And really, if you certify your code for the database compatibility level, you're good to go with the Evergreen SQL. So when there are updates to the platform, which there always will be using the Evergreen SQL version, it's going to update, and patch for features and any kind of security risks and things like that. But you don't have to worry about it breaking your code once it's been certified. And really, the process of that migration is using the Database Migration Assistant, which helps you to evaluate if any of your features won't be supported, if features are on the deprecation list, things like that that you might run into down the road. And the nice thing about the DMA is that it allows you to pick what your target is. So when you spin up the DMA, it says, okay, where are you coming from? So SQL on-prem, and where are you moving to? And it gives you the ability to put it, SQL on IaaS or a virtual machine, Azure SQL DB or Azure SQL MI, and then it'll go through and it'll analyze your database and spit out, okay, here are the things that you have to be concerned about. And then from there, you can do your migration using the Azure Database Migration Service. The dev test pricing was something that came out last year, giving you the ability to spin up very, small footprints of SQL at a discounted rate, right? So you can run these for some of the smaller SKUs and, essentially have your dev test box at a discount. So you're not you're not paying the licensing charges, because we understand that it's developer edition, and you can do all your development right there in Azure at a reasonable price. Another big one was the instance pools. So when we spin up the hardware in the background, maybe we want to have separate instances within that full virtual cluster, to be able to separate out environments and have isolated environments. So you think about like a dev test and prod type environment that you want to deploy, that it's all within the same cluster, but you don't want those environments to be touched from outside hands, or maybe you isolate out your dev boxes from your test boxes from a pure development standpoint to separate out QA from dev or something like that. This gives you a good opportunity to do that. So MI takes a few hours to spin up, because to provision all the services and all that in this environment, in this scenario, to pull up one of the smaller instances. It allows you to spin them up very, very quickly. So they turn on in less than 5 minutes once you have the overall cluster provisioned. So some of the features, some more features that were released in the last year, the smaller options, the additional geographies, the data discovery and classification, the geo restore, which we'll show an overview of that in just a minute here, the service endpoints, the isolated, I can't think of the term. I apologize. It'll come back to me. But you've got the point in time restores for, databases you deleted. You've got bring your own keys, all kinds of stuff like that, and just a bunch of regional support that we've added. And then stuff that's being worked on, you look at your limitless storage scale, your readout scale, right? So that Hyperscale for SQL MI is currently in preview, as well as the larger drive sizes. So 16 terabyte drives for GP are coming out. And then, at some point this year, we'll see the business critical tier be addressed as well for larger storage size. Things like ML services came out. That's not in preview anymore. That's now GA. It just went GA, I believe, back at Ignite. Data virtualization is, giving us that ability to connect to external sources, similar to what we can do with data virtualization on-prem or within Synapse, that kind of thing. The distributed transactions between MIs, hosting of our SSRS and SSIS databases, so more capability around, other Azure services that we can use MI for as the background. More availability. So accelerated database recovery. If you haven't seen this, you can restore databases in a fraction of the time because of the way it stores it in blob storage and taking snapshots. So it's much quicker to restore databases, even very large ones. If you do a YouTube search for accelerated database recovery, you'll see there's very massive amounts of data being moved in a very short amount of time. Long-term backup retention. So now we can help with up to 10 years of backups, which was one of the things that people really needed. Instance aliases, so that the names are more friendly. Working on that, global peering and things like that. Service endpoint policies, again in preview. So a lot of these services, we'll see full capabilities coming out within this calendar year. And one of the big things is that Microsoft wants to position Azure as the safest definition, SQL as the safest destination for all data in the cloud. And so when we talk about network security, things like private link, that was what I was looking for earlier. That's being brought through right now. IPv6, outbound firewall rules, authentication, so AAD. We're going to see some other authentication types come down like a wire later this year. More RBAC controls, and so really it gives our customers more capability around what they need to do. Auditing, monitoring. Recently, we announced GA for log analytics, capturing all of your SQL logs, so it's all in the same place, using the same interface for all of your logging and monitoring. Things like the encryption with Purview, right? So Purview was announced back in December. That is in public preview now. That's our governance tool, and there's direct connectivity with Purview, as well as the encryption being enforced, and extending RBAC with ABAC. And finally, more encryptions, right? So double encryption at rest is in preview, in the SQL Ledger and things like that are coming down the pipe. As I mentioned, we want to hear feedback from customers. So I just grabbed this today to show a point in time, but these are the top 3 requests from our customers, and you can see that in some places, right, make backups portable to on-premises SQL. So if you want to be able to, restore to on-prem, the product team wants to know what is your use case. Give us some information, and there's that link in there, aka MS MIPG-Chimera-survey, right, to be able to help them understand what those use cases are and what customers' needs are. Support for DNS aliasing and enable pausing, right, to reduce costs. What are those use cases? Again, just a snapshot of what customers are looking for and the product team's responses here. We get into migrations. I know we're running a little bit short of time because of the late start, but we talk about migrations. I'll kind of give just a quick snapshot of what we look at, right? So SQL Server Engine, right to managed instance, in most cases is going to be a 1-for-1 with zero downtime, zero code changes. SSIS, we can lift and shift those into Data Factory, or we can modernize them to Azure Data Factory, and rewrite that code. You can also run it in a virtual machine, but you shouldn't have any trouble with SSIS. It should be fully compatible, including your third-party add-ons. Analysis services, tabular, can be deployed directly to Azure Analysis Services. I personally haven't heard of any instances that a tabular model that's been created on-prem couldn't be deployed to Azure Analysis Services. Multi-dimensional, however, you're going to have to build a virtual machine. Multi-dimensional is not being supported by Azure Analysis Services. And then SSRS, you can deploy your RDLs for SSRS directly to Power BI paginated. Now, some of the really big honking SSRS reports out there that have a lot of connections and things like that, you might have a little bit of trouble. But for the majority of your SSRS reports, you're going to be able to deploy directly to Power BI paginated. And as we now just rolled out our premium per user service, it makes it much more flexible for customers to be able to use some of those premium services on a per user basis for just an extra $10 a month per user. You have that ability to now use paginated and some of those other great services. You can also deploy your SSRS service if you need to remain in SSRS to an Azure virtual machine. The database migration service allows for online or offline restores of databases to go live, as well as some other capabilities, with other database providers. So if you check out our database services, or our migration services, do Azure Database Migration, do a search for that, and you'll find there's a whole run book. What's your source? What's your destination? And what are the steps? What's the guide for you to do that migration? But generally, when we talk about migrations in general, we look at, okay, here's what we're going to do as a pre-migration. We're going to discover, we're going to assess, we're going to do any conversions that we need to do. We're going to do the physical migration, migrate the schema and the objects and then the data after, cut it over. And then post-migration, you're going to look at, okay, what's actually happening, right? What's happening in the environment? Are we over provisioned? Do we need to scale that back or scale that up or scale that down, right? To be able to make sure that we're running as efficiently as possible, but most cost effectively as well. I'm speeding through this because we're running short on time. Backups are automatic, right? And we've got long-term backups, long-term retention. I mentioned that. You've got, configurable backup retention up to 35 days. You can do a manual backup off to blob if you want to. So you've got a lot of flexibility when it comes to backups. You can take a backup in blob and restore that blob backup to another MI, right? So you just can't restore it to anything on-prem as of today, but you can restore it to another MI. So if you need to set up another environment, it's quick and easy to be able to do those types of restores. When we talk about the high availability aspects of it, here we're looking at what the tiers and general purpose look like. It's running on Azure storage accounts and using that built-in HA from the Azure Premium Storage. And then you've got your compute nodes that are connecting into those environments. But when it comes to business critical, it's actually running an always on availability group. So we do give you that read-only endpoint to be able to connect in and, attach your SSRS reports to it, or anything else you need to use a read-only endpoint for. And that's part of the business critical service. And you're not paying any additional for that. It's part of that service in general. And finally, you've got your failover, right? So there's a really good best practice. I'll share out these notes to Gene so that you guys can go through it. There's a bunch of resources at the end of this. But in essence, there are guides that help you walk through exactly how to set this up. Set up your traffic managers, set up your load balancers, and you can do a manual or an automatic failover to do your geo replication, across regions, and essentially allowing for that HADR environment that's ready to go for your mission critical applications. So again, there's a ton of resources in here, whether it's, blogs or, templates or, just how to set different things up. I'll share these out, like I said, with the team, through Gene. And if you want, you can shoot me a note over email. I can share the slides to you. Please follow me on Twitter. Please check out my YouTube channel, subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. I really appreciate all the support. And I appreciate your time. I apologize for going over a little bit over 1 o'clock here.
It's okay, Chris. By the way, this is an amazing presentation. I really love it. You understand? You're welcome. If you guys have any question, please raise your hand, unmute yourself, and go ahead and ask. There may be 10 to 20 minutes, second latency. Just give them some time, Chris.
Sure. I see a hand went up. Is that?
Yes. Go ahead, sorry. Leonid. You can give me a second. You guys can unmute yourself. Feel free to unmute yourself. You do have right for that. Who's speaking? Linda, can you? Leonid, I cannot hear you clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, there is no chat. And before you did that, I could not ask a question. So if you wanted feedback on the presentation, we couldn't give it.
To be honest with you, I did that just to facilitate you to interact directly with the speaker, because, this is the virtual meeting. We normally meet in person.
I understand that, but if you ask for our feedback and then don't give us access to give you that feedback, that is redundant. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
That's absolutely right. But you are free also to go to the meetup and share your comment there if you want to.
There is no chat facility here.
No,
I have no capability of a chat.
Absolutely, you're right. Linda, sorry about that. I just disabled it, but you are free to go to our meetup and go to this presentation and then add the comment there. So this way, it would be better because the comment will be there. Other people can see it. Thank you so much. Great question, Linda. Are there any other questions, guys?
Looks like we can't get Leonid.
Leonid, go ahead. Oh, I cannot hear you, Leonid.
Unfortunately, it's not coming through clearly.
Yes.
If there are any questions, feel free to shoot me an email.
Okay, I think we are all set here. I'm going to share my screen, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Chris, by the way, great presentation. You guys follow Chris on Twitter. And then let me quickly share my screen. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending our presentation. Follow us. Don't forget to share this meetup group with your friends. And also, this session is being recorded. I will keep you posted. Also, don't forget to save your spot for our next presentation. By the way, Chris, it was an honor to have you here. This was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much for putting all of this information together.
No problem. Yeah, and like I said, I'll shoot you an email with the actually, I'm not sure if I have your email. Yeah, I'll shoot you an email with the slides.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
If you have any questions, but otherwise, have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all, guys. Have a good one. Bye.